Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Smut Chat with Gene Bean, yours truly. Today, I'm very thrilled to be joined by the one and only Juniper, one of the members of the Smutcap. Juniper, please say hello. Tell us who you are.
Hi, everybody. I'm Juniper. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be doing this with you today. So, I am one of the founding members of the Smutcap. I have the very sexy job of project management for our group. So, I'm the one who bugs everybody about their deadlines.
Very important, though.
Oh, super important. I live right outside of Philadelphia with my husband and teenage daughter, and just trying to get through the day to day of this hellscape we're currently living in.
Yeah, that I
Yeah.
resonate with pretty much everything you just said. So, yes, on there, I'm so glad to have you here and to chat
Yay.
with you and have this opportunity to hang out. By the way, love your shirt.
Thank
Love
you.
that shirt.
Thank you. I do love hot moms for sure.
And I think you are a hot mom,
Well,
which
thank
is
you.
a really great segue. Your shirt provides us the perfect segue into the topic for today. So, as you may or may not know, March has been deemed MILF Madness, a celebration of our older friends. This has been organized and orchestrated by the amazing writers at the Black Queen Congressional Congress. If you don't follow them, BQC, you absolutely should. They're amazing, and they've
Yes, they
been
are.
spending the month of March celebrating the sexuality and sex drive of our lovely, beautiful, sexy older women. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So your shirt is actually like very on brand here. So thank you for like being on that brainwave. So I will say like first off, I'll start and then I actually love to hear more from you is as somebody who's like entering my late 30s, I don't think I am the demographic that this month is about, although obviously I'm older than people who are in their 20s. But I will say a couple things like as I've been getting older, I've noticed a few things that like I have struggled with more than I thought I would. So like certain joints are a little tighter than they used to be and like that was interesting. What was really shocking to me was like moving out of the space of not being the target demographic. And what I mean by that is like 18 to 28-year-old women who are like young and sexy and they're the people who are falling in love. Like all love stories are about them, sex stories are about them. They're the people who are being pined after. You don't see those stories like you kind of hit 30 and you don't really see those stories anymore for at least for women, or at least from my anecdotal observation of things. So I think I had actually had a hard time transitioning out of that phase and being in my like truly in my mid to late 30s at this point. So anyway, that's a little bit about sort of like what my experiences are like, but I would absolutely love to hear about your experience. And if you want to share as much as you want about your age, your background, whatever you want to do, please tell us a little bit more about Juniper.
Sure, sure. So, I think the reason why you and I are having this conversation is because I'm actually turning 50 in November.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
Thank you. So, it's a big one. And I do have to say, when you asked me to participate in this conversation, it was like a little bit of a gut punch because, like, I'm not an older woman. But then I told my husband, and he was like, "Didn't one of your friends just become a grandmother who's only like 2 years older than you?" Rude, number one, to bring that up. But then I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I am like 50 is still considered like an older woman, but I don't see myself that way. And I think, at least in my group of friends who like range from like, well, 30s, like you, but also like the majority of my friends are in like their mid to late 40s up until like their like early 60s. But it's weird because none of us see ourselves as like older women
Mm.
in that like cliched stereotype way. So I think it's interesting because there's like, in my opinion, a new breed of older women that is like something that hasn't really been seen before. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this generation and the generations coming after us sort of shatter all of those old lady stereotypes that are currently held. It's going to be really interesting to see how that definition changes. Because to me,
Yeah,
50 is the new 30.
I actually agree with you, and I think what's interesting is like I think the way media portrays things, it's like you're young and then one day you're old. Like there's just this moment where you're like, oh, I'm an old crone now, and that's like that's the way it's portrayed in media. I think with my older friends, they don't feel older because they're not, right? That's the interesting thing. But the reason why they might be labeled as older by other people or by society is because they don't fit into that 20s and 30s demographic that is still very much so the target of most marketing for women. So I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, I have so many thoughts about that. So what I find is so interesting, especially in the like audio erotica world or erotica world in general, but also in media, like movies and TV, is that and maybe it's because the people in these marketing departments don't want to think about people their mom's age still
Mm.
actively, having a fulfilling and active sex life, and it kind of is ishy for them. We are an untapped market. We are a market of women who are not ashamed to talk about sexuality, who are not quiet about wanting their pleasure or asking for what they want. And we have disposable income, you know? And when marketers and people in the industry realize the opportunity that they're missing by marketing movies, TV shows, audio erotica, to our age group instead of, the 18 to 25 or the, even 25 to 35, they're just missing a huge opportunity because, again, I really do feel very strongly that like this generation of older women, people just don't recognize that like it's not what it was 20 years ago.
Mhm.
It's not even what it was 10 years ago. We're the Gen X older generation, and we are a very specific, very different, and I know I'm saying this because I'm biased, group of women. Like, it's just we're very different. And when marketers realize that they're missing out on this opportunity and that we are basically a cash cow that's untapped, we're going to see a big change, I think, in how media portrays us. I
I
really
would love
do.
to. I agree with you, and I think that's actually something that's always been so interesting. Is like when people, when Hollywood says like, "Oh well, nobody will watch that story because we don't like Asian stories." Look how successful Crazy Rich Asians was, right?
Hmm.
And what's so interesting is like so much of like women's products, women's focused things are geared towards looking younger, right? How many wrinkle creams and anti-agings and that, not to say there's nothing inherently wrong with using those products or wanting to use those products, but it's geared towards looking younger than you are. And I wonder what revolution it would be if we actually changed tactics and said, hey, as you age, things are going to change about you. So let's embrace that. Let's talk
Hmm.
about how you deal with graying hair, how you deal with wrinkles. You can totally go for anti-aging or you can just embrace them. Like, let's actually cater to both of these. Because the other thing, too, is to your point, as we get older, we tend to make more money. Like, we have money that these younger folks don't.
Hmm.
So I think it's a really
Absolutely.
lost opportunity. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think we are seeing some changes. I mean, there are a lot of women, both in media and like on TikTok, who are embracing the gray, who are saying like, no, I'm not going to keep dyeing my hair. It's fine if you do want to, but a lot of women are saying, I love like my natural hair color, my natural gray. We have women like Pamela Anderson who are going out to, these red carpet events wearing no makeup because they are just tired of it. And I do think that we're going to continue to see things like this because, again, I feel like this generation and the generations coming up after us, they don't care about the stereotypes as much as people used to necessarily. Have you been on over 40s TikTok? I mean, it's full of these vibrant, beautiful women being like, I am not going to live by these standards or these boxes you're going to put me in because I'm 50. I'm going to wear vinyl and fishnets and boots and go dancing, or I'm going to wear the kooky outfits that I want to wear. And I'm not going to, follow your traditional path because I don't have to. And that's the thing. I feel like in my mom's generation, they felt like they had to. Like when you hit a certain age, you got your moo, you had your last screwable day, and then you watched Wheel of Fortune and you went to bed at 9:30. And like that is not happening anymore. It's just not. And I love to see it.
I think one of the things that I love in this is like recently, it's still new, it's still very tiny, but it's starting. I'm seeing it is like there is this idea of being desirable, like as a sexual or romantic partner by younger
Hmm.
people, and I think that's really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's interesting for me to see it go from the like Mrs. Roper stereotype of a cougar, sex hungry older woman who's a joke
Hmm.
into these, like, actually, oh, these women are sexy. These women know what they want. They're not afraid to ask for it. They're going to teach me some stuff. They've been around the corner and they're not looking for me to give them everything they need in life. Like they've already accomplished that. they're just looking for me to be like a partner or, a fling or something. But like, I feel like it's somewhat different sometimes when these guys are dating people their own age because you're growing together.
Mhm.
There's an appeal in being with a woman who knows herself, knows what she wants, isn't afraid to ask for it. And that's why I think like the appeal of like dating an older woman is great. And what I find too is with so many of my friends, they're in their 50s, they're divorced, they're on the dating sites, for the first time in 25 years. And so many of them are getting matched with like these like 30-year-old, 25-year-old guys. And they're like, listen, I'm 50. You obviously clicked on the wrong thing. And they're like, no, no, you're hot. Like, let's go out, and it's a shock for them. But it's one they're enjoying,
I mean, who wouldn't? I
right?
mean, like that's I do think that like this idea that women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are still very sexy, very screwable, very desirable in that way. And that actually feels like a really good segue into like kind of audio erotica, which is obviously the space that we occupy as content creators. And I'm curious to hear like a lot, I would say a lot of the voice actors that we listen to tend to err on the younger side. I'm curious for your thoughts here because I would say, like, for the most part, I am reacting to someone's voice. So, like, their them as a person and their actual age doesn't matter so much as the voice that I am listening to in whatever fantasy world I've decided to immerse myself in that moment. I will admit, though, there are just a couple of voice actors on this app that are really, really young, and I can't get past it. Like for me in my mid 30s. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, and then no wrong answer, no right. I'm just curious to know like your experience with audio erotica and listening to younger voice actors of all genders, and yeah.
Yes. So, like you, I am very driven by voice, right? So, even if I know them from social media or, know that they're younger than me, if it's good storytelling, if it's a good audio, I can sink into it and not necessarily care about their age, with one or two exceptions, and one in particular because it looks like my daughter's best friend. And I'm like, dude, I want to take away your PlayStation for talking such filth. Like, I can't. But that's a me thing. Like, he
Yeah.
does great work. But I know that's a conversation that we see a lot, like in like social media and like on a Discord maybe, where these women who are, my age or a little bit younger, who are like, oh my gosh, there's a 20-year age difference between me and this voice actor. I feel pervy. And it's like, well, no, they're doing a job that they signed up for. They're creating a fantasy for you. You don't have to feel bad because they're younger than you. Like, you don't see men feeling bad for lusting after, younger women, either on screen or just in life in general. And all you're doing is listening to a voice. So like, I, I, I personally can like kind of keep those two things separate, like the art from the artist. Except for like one or two. I really do, but they're
That makes
just,
me feel better
yeah.
because there's just a few I can't get over. There's just a few where I'm like, I can't like it's you're just a little too, and I think I mean, the great thing about this is everyone's gonna have a different experience. There are gonna be
Mhm.
people who listen to this video who are gonna be like, no, I don't have a problem at all, which is great. And then there are some people who are gonna feel who are struggling with that kind of like creepy, pervy feeling. All I will say to that is like, remember that there are differences in power due on gender. The reason it feels different for older women versus older men is because there's a power dynamic difference, and there's still a power dynamic between older and younger in general. But I also think like that's where the separating the voice from the actor piece is
Yes.
important to me personally. Of course, everyone is welcome to have a different opinion than that. So one of the things that I've noticed is obviously as we get older, our bodies change, and that is true regardless of gender, right? And we hold our weight in different places. Our joints start hurting, right? We start seeing changes in our hair, wrinkles, things like that. And I think the marketing industry has done a great deal of work to try and make us feel like that is a bad thing. And they do that by trying to sell us anti-aging products. And they do that by, trying to selling us on like wild products that are meant to cover up our grays or whatever it is. And I wonder what would happen if we flipped the script on that and said, "Hey, your body is going to change, and here's how you go about embracing it." And I'm thinking about this because I could see people who are older not having that like immediate chemistry with someone that's like hot and heavy, and thinking that that's a sign that they don't deserve sex or aren't as sexually driven as they used to be anymore. And we do know that, once we hit certain ages, especially for those of us who are experiencing menopause or perimenopausal, our hormones change. We might need different things. Things that used to feel good don't feel as good anymore. And I think sometimes that is interpreted as a bad thing, that my sex drive is going away, or I am not desirable anymore because I'm just not drawn to the same things I used to be when I was 20. And I wonder what would happen if we actually just embrace the changes that go along the way. So I'm curious to hear, like, whatever your thoughts are on that. I'd love to know, like, what's on your mind around that topic.
Sure, absolutely. And I think part of it that I'll get into goes back to like that marketing opportunity. So I do think that you're absolutely correct. As you get older, there is a shift. You're not always going to be the one who's like, right, like you meet somebody in a club and you have to go out into the alley or to their car because you have to be with them right away. Especially if you're in a long-term relationship with, like, for me, a husband of 20 years. Like, when you're with somebody that often for that long, like that, it still happens, but occasionally you're going to need a longer build up. It's not just going to be like, hey, we have a 20-minute break at work, between work, like let's go upstairs. Like, you know, a lot of the foreplay is going to be happening throughout the entire day. And then after the kids are in bed, or like after you get everything done, like you're going to be like, okay, now let's go. So I think that, like, from that standpoint, yes, there are going to be changes. And there are also going to be physical changes. I mean, realistically, as much as we hate to say it, like there are changes in our bodies as we get older, especially as we hit like our 60s or 70s. And like that's when I feel like communication with your partner and with yourself about, hey, I might not finish as quickly as I used to. Like, let's bring in toys, or I'm going to need help with lube because or lubrication, because that's very common as you age.
Mm-hmm.
But don't be ashamed to admit that. And again, that's where that marketing opportunity comes in, because I don't know about you, but most of the commercials I've ever seen about lube geared towards older women is about pain in sex, instead of like, hey, this is this cool, fun thing that you can bring and help enhance your experience. It's almost like it's gonna hurt if you don't use this. Like, that's not the way you're gonna be selling this stuff, my guy. You know what I mean? So I think,
Right.
yeah. But I do think, like, there are things that you may have to shift. If your knees are bad, maybe your favorite position isn't going to work anymore. But, like, it's all stuff that you can accept and realize that even though your sexuality is changing, it's not going away. It's just maturing or evolving like you are.
Yeah.
And you just have to work with it.
I think that's beautifully put. And this, the idea that we need to embrace ourselves, embrace our changes at every stage of our lives. And that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have little moments of grief. Of course we do. We're all going to have those. But I think we've been socialized to maybe stay in that grief space, as
Mhm.
opposed to learning how to embrace a new version of our sexual selves, and what it might mean for us and our partners, and what needs to be brought into the bedroom. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I understand it. I mean, obviously, the hot and heavy, need you right away, super passionate, that is beautiful. And that's why it's in movies and that's why it's in TV shows, because we've all been there and it's fun.
Hmm.
But like, you can't sustain that necessarily your entire life. So knowing that sexuality is fluid and that what you like or what you can do, because it's different, doesn't mean that it's worse. It doesn't mean that you're losing that part of yourself. You're just adapting.
Yeah. And I think in those moments where you really miss it, that's what apps like Dipsy and Quinn and UCA are all for, is like, hey, let me go into fantasy world for a second where I don't need a lot of foreplay. Go back to my, like, maybe a younger version or a different version of
Oh,
yourself for just 20 minutes, you know?
absolutely. I mean, also too, I just do find it funny that, like, being at my age, like some of the scenarios, like, oh, I'm going to go upstairs and check out the bedroom of this guy in a bookstore. And like the safety panda in me is like, no, 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 we don't do that. Like, we know better than that. But like, I'm like, okay, well, maybe 24-year-old us doesn't know better than
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah. And
like,
also, it's a fantasy, so like
exactly.
we're safe. We're solidly safe with these voice actors. Yeah.
Exactly. But no, you're
Um,
exactly right. It's nice to lose yourself in scenarios that may not be accessible to you anymore, but you can still lose yourself in that fantasy, and that's really fun.
I think these are really, really good. I hope this is resonating with people. And if it's not, please leave us a comment, let us know, give us some feedback. And I'm going to transition us to talk about sort of maybe some tips that we could give to our listeners in the event that they might want to bring something in. They're wanting to embrace a new era of their sexual selves. So I'm gonna start, and then I'd love to hear your things. Yeah, I think like for me, the thing that I would recommend is like that thing that you're thinking about, that like toy that you've been thinking about, or the app that you've been wanting to download, or that new position that you've maybe been wanting to bring into the bedroom with your partner, I say do it. Just buy the thing, subscribe to the thing, bring a conversation up with your partner and see what happens, right? And see what happens. And obviously, this is under the assumption that you're with a safe partner who's going to be really receptive to what you're saying. But that thing that you've been thinking about, do it. Just do it. Why not? Just do
Absolutely. Yes,
it.
absolutely, for sure. So I'm not currently menopausal, but I do have friends who are. And one thing I can recommend to like that group of women is, so many women in the generations above us suffered in silence with menopause. It was just, this is going to happen to you, and then that part of your sexual life is going to be over because you fulfilled your function. So what I know. So what I think is like, as you're starting to go into that time in your life, don't suffer in silence. Have the conversations with your doctors, with your partners, with your female friends. And because everybody's experience is different, but you can find out that there are so many different ways to cope with the changes, like low libido, like, needing a toy or lubrication in the bedroom, or just sometimes you're just not going to feel like yourself. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that the sexual part of your life is over. It just means that it's changing. And if you have the conversations with the people that you need to, hopefully you can get the support and the tools to help you have maybe a different type of sex life, but still one that's fulfilling and active and fun.
Yeah. I love that. I could not think of a better note to end this smut chat on. So I'm going to say thank you to our resident hot mom, Juniper. Thank you for joining me. I'm so glad we had to have this conversation. And thank you all for joining and listening to another smut chat with Gene Bean. We'll catch you next time. And until then, stay smutty, everyone.
Stay
Bye.
smutty. Bye.